I'm Sherry Sylvester, a senior fellow at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and I want to welcome you to this live stream primer, The Work God Has Given Us to Do, a conversation about suburban women, politics, and policy. This program is presented in conjunction with the Bluebonnet Caucus, which is the women's caucus at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We have with us today two icons of the conservative movement in Texas, Jacki Deason and Bunni Pounds, joining us via Zoom from Dallas. Jacki is the host of the Jacki Deason Show, a weekly show and podcast airing on Blaze Media. Previously, Jacki worked for an engineering firm specializing in energy production, national security, and environmental cleanup. She served as a legal counsel on Capitol Hill to the chairman of the Subcommittee on the Constitution and the ranking member of the Commercial and Administrative Law Subcommittee, advising on oversight of federal agencies. Jacki studied economics, Spanish, and world history at Marshall University, Oxford University in the UK, and the University of Zaragoza in Spain. She's also an alum of Vanderbilt Law School. Great to have Jacki with us. Bunni Pounds is the president and founder of Christians Engaged. Christians Engaged is a statewide, nonpartisan ministry that awakens, motivates, educates, and empowers believers in Jesus Christ to pray for their nation and elected officials regularly, to vote in every election, to impact their culture, and to engage their heart in some form of civic education or engagement for the well-being of America. As a political consultant by profession, Bunni spent over 16 years running the campaigns of members of Congress around Texas. She started her career as a campaign manager for former U.S. Congressman Jeb Hensarling and then launched her own firm, Bunni Pounds and Associates. Bunni has a bachelor's degree in political science from Baptist Political University and associate degree in theology from Christ for the Nations Institute. Thank you both for joining us today. It is just great to have you. Bunni, why don't you start? We see these bios. You've founded Christians Engaged, which has become a movement in Texas and across the country. What is your story? How did you get here?
Well, thank you, Sherry. It's great to be with you and really great to be with one of my dear friends, Jacki Deason, today. So it's just an honor. But yeah, I was a homeschooling mom that just really was looking for a purpose in America. I thought I was going to be a missionary to Latin America, and I married a pest control man, and all of a sudden I'm running a pest control company and looking for a purpose. And what really captured my heart was the plight of the unborn and the sanctity of human life issue. And I started getting involved. I volunteered for a campaign. I started putting out yard signs for Congressman Jeb Hensarling in my neighborhood. Showed up at a state convention and testified in front of a platform committee on a school choice issue. And all of a sudden, started really realizing I had a voice, I could make a difference. And that turned into me going and finishing my bachelor's degree at night and graduating when I was 32 as a homeschooling mom. And went to work for Congressman Hensarling and then, running one of the largest GOP consulting firms in Texas. But I have to say, Sherry, it really comes down to finding the passion for your life and realizing that there's a mission and a destiny for your life. And after I ran for Congress in 2018, almost won a congressional race, I knew the Lord had called me to go find what I called was the awakening church. Not the woke church, but the awakening body of Christ that's waking up right now, and start plugging them into habits of prayer, voting, and engagement. And now we've built the only 501c3 nonpartisan Christian get out the vote system for the church in all 50 states. And we have over 200,000 Christians in that system, and over 2,000 Christians have now gone through our long form classes on civics and biblical worldview. So, one person can make a difference, and we're just getting going. So I'm excited to be here and excited for what God is doing in Texas and what we in the conservative movement have before us. I think it's a great moment, though we have challenges. There's things that we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Bunny. It's a great story, and she leaves out the hard part. There's probably on one hand the number of political consultants in the state of Texas, even as big as the state is, that are women. Not very many. As one of them, I know that road. So it was the big loss when you went over to Christians Engaged because you were such a good strategist. But you clearly are on the path that you need to be on. So, Jacki, all over the world, what's your story?
Well, first of all, thank you, Texas Public Policy Foundation and Sherry and all the team there for putting this on. And likewise, honored to be on with my friend Bunny Pounds. We're both here in Dallas, and so we've become good friends over the years because our lives are really purpose-driven, mission-driven, and our missions overlap. So, I grew up in a family that made sure that I was, I guess, in church services 3 times a week from the time I was 8 days old. And overlapping what Bunny just said, part of what you take away from that upbringing is that God has a plan for everyone's life. Like, everyone has God-given talents. Everyone has a calling. No one is an accident. We're all here on purpose. And we have to find out what those talents are, develop them, and put them to use for all the right reasons. And so, early on, I just decided that maybe I had a talent for academics and speaking and networking. And so that led me to now over 30 years of being involved in politics, but also eventually law school, working at a firm, and then deciding, this really isn't meeting my needs as far as my mission for my life. So I went to Capitol Hill for 7 years. And as you said, I was counsel there, working on all kinds of issues that are very, near and dear to those of us who are faith-based. So I had international religious freedom. I had the pro-life issue. I had, just First Amendment, free exercise of faith as part of my portfolio. And election integrity, in fact. We did oversight of the voting section of the Department of Justice. So now I'm in Dallas, and I've been working with think tanks like Texas Public Policy at times. And I have the Jacki Daily Show on Glenn Beck's network, which is The Blaze, which you can find me very easily online. And mostly I do energy and environment issues, but even that to me is part of my mission. And in fact, I did a podcast with Bunni that you can find online explaining why these issues that might not be obviously important to, let's say, suburban women or to people of faith, they actually are important. There's actually a reason why we should care about which countries are the dominant countries geopolitically, because that says a lot about what our world looks like. And energy and environment issues actually determine, in many ways, who's the superpower. So, I'd rather have us in charge than some of the alternatives. And my show is about keeping the country strong. So that's kind of how I spend my time now.
And I want to talk to you more about that. But first, let's frame this a little bit. Lindsey Graham over in South Carolina was the first person who said out loud that Republicans, conservatives, we'll just mush those together. We're not a political organization here at TPPF, but we have a suburban woman problem. There's a gap, and it's not just post-Dobbs, but there's a gap where the Democratic Party is, where the Republicans are dominant, male dominant. We're ahead of the Democrats by 15, 20 points. But when it comes to women, men are in the Democratic Party, men are in the Republican Party. Women, by about 20 points, are leaning towards the Democratic Party on a number of issues, climate change being one. And I'd start with Bunny again. What do you think? Why do you think that is? Is it messaging? Is it issues? Is it style? The Democrats have a woman vice president in office. Why do you think that it is that people are turning away, that suburban women are not embracing the conservative movement?
Well, I think like every group in our nation, we have a division really about worldviews. It's really about our values is the biggest division. And so what we're seeing with a lot of suburban educated women is sometimes we floated away from the basic family values, the founding principles of this nation, and we forget it's not all about us. The world doesn't revolve around our needs and our convenience and everything that we want. And so I think what we're seeing is this division, and this is going to sound harsh, really harsh, but I'm going to say it anyway, that some women are living for themselves and some women are living for the next generation. And so we have to bridge that gap, Sherry. And how we do that is have conversations and to bring the truth and love and share the biblical truth of who God says they are and their purposes and destinies for their life. And, Jesus said in Matthew about the greatest commandment is to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourselves. Well, we've gotten away from that in our culture. And frankly, women are the greatest force for good in this nation if we can reclaim their hearts. And that's what I know Jacki and I are both going after is, man, it's time for us to be the mama bears that stand up for truth, that stand up for things that are right. And we've got a messaging problem in that we're not talking directly to them sometimes. We're talking around them, and we're afraid to speak biblical truth and really speak what our conservative values hold for fear of it turning them against us. But I think sometimes the bolder we are, the more they realize that, man, I can be bold too, and I can really see a difference in the next generations.
It's much harder. I want to get your thoughts on it, Jacki, but because our communications is so divided, and our instinct is, well, when they say that, well, then we slap them back with that. And I've been in so many campaign meetings where that's been the thing. Well, they hit you. They hit you on this issue. You've got to hit them back. Jacki, what's your thought about suburban women and the conservative movement?
Well, now is a good time for me to say that Texas Public Policy Foundation is not responsible for the viewpoints I express here. Please don't hold them accountable. These are my thoughts only. Okay, I will say a few things here. First of all, I'm always a bit shocked when I hear that the abortion issue is so dominant with suburban women. I should not be shocked, but I am shocked. I'll tell you why. I've been talking about the pro-life issue for 30 years. I'll talk about it for 30 more years. It's so foundational, right? But like at this election, I'm thinking about how do we stop World War III? How do we stop the collapse of the currency? As in, will the dollar be worth anything 5 years from now if we keep printing money and spending money? Like, these are the thoughts, like the border. What are we going to do to stop, Iran and others from running their special forces across the southern border to do God knows what to this country? I feel like we have really big, pressing, catastrophic issues right now. Whereas apparently down the street, the women are thinking about, can the women in the state next to us get an abortion at 15 weeks versus 5 weeks? And am I going to place my vote on, this issue? I really cannot relate. I just cannot relate. I feel like the Democrats' message to women as if we were just a set of ovaries and nothing else. Like, what about your heart and your mind? I feel like it's time to get really bold on this issue. I don't handle this issue on my show, but I think we have to address the abortion issue hand on because that's the only thing that the Democrats have, right? It's the only issue. What else could they run on, actually, at this point? And I'm not, as you say, I'm not being partisan here. I'm just speaking to women as voters. I've been watching this for a long time. I think we have to, as Bunni said, come from a place of love. I think the reason why women get so emotional and passionate about the pro-choice issue is because many of them are post-abortive, or they've helped others obtain abortions. And so now you see they're vested emotionally and spiritually in that issue. And that's why it's so intense. So this is so tough. This is, it's such an emotional issue that you can't talk to them when you're giving, remarks as if you're talking to Cecile Richards, who runs Planned Parenthood. You have to talk to them like they are a post-abortive woman, right? I used to say this all the time on Capitol Hill to my boss and to other members. Like, they would go to the House floor, and give these fiery speeches that clearly would be appropriate if you were debating Cecile Richards, the founder, or who was running Planned Parenthood at the time. It's not appropriate if you're speaking to a woman who is very emotionally invested in this issue. So, taking the guise of, you have to give her grace and help her to see the issue less emotionally after, whatever, from forgiving herself or whatever else. And so I know this is a very hot topic, but let's be serious. If we don't start speaking openly and boldly and straightforwardly and with love directly to the issues, we're going to lose them. So I hope I'm not coming across too harshly, but that's how I see the lay of the land. And I think that women just need to think that all issues are women's issues, right? Not just that one issue. You do care whether this country is safe for your children. You do care about whether or not we end up going to war through NATO or in the Pacific or somewhere. These are really, really, really big issues. So you have to address the hard one and then broaden the perspective, I think, for women.
Sherry, and if I can back on that real fast.
Sure, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we have to move. That is so key. We have to address that issue, and we have to address it boldly with healing. Otherwise, we're never going to get through it. Thank you, Jacki, for saying I was trying to walk around it. You just boldly said it. But then
Bunny is not responsible for my remarks. This is not Bunny's fault.
Then the other thing is, we have to make the point. We have to make women are not single issue voters. We have to move them into understanding there are so many issues that they should care about. I got involved because of the sanctity of life issue, but I also got involved because of deficit spending and the national debt that at that time was $3 trillion. $3 trillion. Now it's 30 plus trillion, right? So, what we're doing to the next generation of Americans, bankrupting our children and grandchildren, is horrendous. What we're seeing with the sexualization of our children in public schools, in our books, in our entertainment, this has got to cause women to rise up. And so, we have to continue to talk to women, specifically suburban women, about all these issues. We make the point at Christians Engaged that Christians are not single issue voters. We just did a primary platform comparison where we put what the Bible says on the issue, what Marxism says on the issue, what the Democrat platform and the Republican platform says, in all quotes, on 15 different issues to show Christians that they're not single issue voters. And the same goes for women. So I think we just have to continue to talk about things other than abortion. But to Jacki's point, we've got to bring a message of healing, boldness with healing and love.
I really agree on the boldness with healing and love. And as a political strategist, we've got to make sure that we keep our message focused on life. I believe the progressives beat us because they didn't focus on life, they focused on freedom. You're telling women what they can do and what they can't do. None of us want to hear that. So I think your message is absolutely right, that we've got to continue to focus on life. I wanted to bring that up in terms of what pulls people back. As a person that's been involved in the feminist movement for, I think now 40 years, it's very concerning to me as a suburban woman that now you can just declare yourself to be a woman. And I'm wondering, in looking at the polling, you can see that on the one hand, we we go everywhere and we've got gender neutral bathrooms. We lost that war. So now we all have to use these dirty bathrooms in public places. But I'm wondering what you think that message, the whole trans, gender's not binary message, how that's working politically.
You want to go first, Jacki?
Okay, sure. I think the Bud Light saga showed us that there is a segment of the population that absolutely does not want to have an agenda pushed at it at its parties and during its good times off from work. I think there's an interesting backlash that's happening now, and you're watching a lot of the corporate entities kind of back off of this. I think it's interestingly broken the LGB separate from the T. Actually, I'm seeing a huge change there, which we don't have enough time to go into all of that. But I don't know. I feel like people are beginning to understand that we're in a scary place where women are just being erased, and I'm very concerned about women losing value in society going forward. You think about this. You don't need a woman anymore to play. I mean, I'm talking about a biological woman here to play women's sports. I mean, conceivably, you could have an entire team that were not born biological women. You don't need a woman anymore to have children, right? So, I mean, historically, women were occupying a very subordinate, sometimes scary existence, right? As a second-class citizen in many societies, but they were necessary, absolutely necessary to continue the society. Now, suddenly they're not. We're not even needed for that. Okay, so I find that very concerning. I really believe that I'm just saying the status of women overall in the society is going down. I'm not sure what we'll be needed for in a few years. So I think about things like that. And now in real life, I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think there's going to be a big correction because of the people who are going to be telling their stories, people who transitioned and now are very regretful because, so often these are very unstable teenagers. And what a turbulent time in life, what a vulnerable time in life. When I was in school, which isn't that long ago, we had to go through sex education, and we were told through 4 years of it, it is normal to feel uncomfortable with yourself and with your body and to feel awkward at this time in your life. That used to be acknowledged as normal. But now these kids are being told that, no, there's something, there's a problem here. There's something wrong with you. And you need to transition and make this irreversible decision to sterilize yourself, basically, and change your body. So I really think we're going to see a lot of heart-wrenching stories, true stories, of people who will tell that now. And you're going to see society reverse and look back on this, as a scary time for those young people who didn't have advocates or for whatever reason, the foundation to see the issue differently at the time. So I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's the long and short of it.
And I want to, before I get back to Bunny, I want to ask you another question. I was reading, the young women, the Gen Zs, they can't see themselves as conservative for the most part, although we have some very strong young conservative women in our movement. But one of the things that they're so anxious, there's a lot of therapy, there's a lot of anxiety. And one of the things, Jacki, that's driving that anxiety is what seems to me is an irrational fear of climate change.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, climate politics has always been out there, conservation, but I've seen in my life young women tear up with fear. What is that about?
I do a whole show that focuses in on these issues. If they listen to the Jacki Daily show, they would no longer be fearful. You dispel fear with facts.
Tune in to Jacki's show.
The Jacki Daily show. Yes, dispelling fear with facts. basically hundreds of billions of dollars are being poured into the propaganda campaign that is meant to do exactly that, to scare them into not having children, for example. Notice the common theme, right? Transition, don't have children. Fear climate change, don't have children. I think that they're so young. The young are the easiest to manipulate. I remember because I was a strident environmental activist when I was a teenager. I was terrified of acid rain, a vanishing ozone layer, killer bees, saccharin. I'm old enough now. I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to remember every few years there has to be a panacea. This one is a little different because what it's designed to do is convince you to, sacrifice your rights to a world body, because only a world body can solve a global problem. Sacrifice your money. They need your money because if they can't redistribute trillions of dollars to their political donors for green tech, well, then they can't halt the rise of the oceans. Sacrifice your future, having children. There's just no limit to what you're being asked to sacrifice this time around. And so, I just think that we have to get to these kids and talk to them in ways that they care about. And we know that generation cares a lot about equity. They care about compassion and poverty. Tell them about, the 1 billion people on the planet who still don't have electricity and running water, and therefore their lifespans are about 47 years old because they don't have enough energy. Those are people who suffer every day, and that's never going to change for as long as we don't roll out the energy that we do have available right now, which is fossil fuels and nuclear. You can't deploy enough wind and solar right now or 10 years from now to fix that problem. So I think there are things they do care about, but someone has to take the time and get through all that noise that's in the press, and that would be the parents, I think.
Well, and Bunny, the work that you're doing is getting through that noise. What do you find when when you're going to churches and different groups and organizing ongoing prayer, which is a big change in a lot of people's lives? What kinds of questions are raised? Is there pushback from younger women, or what's the world look like from where you're at?
Well, within the faith community, there's a couple things that are just really on hot topics right now. One of them is, of course, the sexualization of our children. I mean, we saw a study from Virginia Tech last year that confirmed that there's a fad going on within young females that are severely depressed, and they're at 12, 13, 14, being, really taking dramatic steps to change their bodies, right? To turn into trans men. And that's a fad that we've got to stop. And I think women, being motherly,
And
we
it's
want
not
to
going the
protect
other
our
way.
children.
Let me interrupt
No.
you. It's not going
Yeah.
the other way. It's women to men.
Yeah, it's women to men for the most part. And so we want to stop that. We want to stop the entertainment industry that's constantly putting characters in every single show, messaging and cartoons now, Blue's Clues. I mean, you name it. Kirk Cameron was just with me a couple weeks ago and announced that he's doing a new TV show geared to young people through Brave Books to push back on all this messaging that our kids are getting. So we're seeing Christian people that have never been involved politically starting to get active. There's a big movement in Texas called "Don't Mess with Our Kids" that we're going to have a rally in Austin on April 13 at 1:00, and they've already got 400 women signed up for this, and they're going for 1,000. That are going to say, "Don't mess with our kids in Texas. We're done." That and women's sports. I mean, if any woman is asleep right now, they have to wake up when they see what's happening to women's sports. I mean, it's so unfair to women to have biological male be able to compete in sports. So, I mean, it's just common sense, but we have to get out stories like the Babylon Bee getting censored because they called Rachel Levin the man of the year versus woman of the year, and they get banned off social media, right, and get dropped off of Twitter, and therefore Elon Musk buys Twitter. Those stories are important for the American public to wake up, and I think we're seeing that gradual, but we have to have those conversations, and we have to make sure people are getting those stories because they're not getting them from the mainstream media.
It is important. And, here in Texas, one of our great heroes that we have had here is Senator Lois Kolkhorst, a Republican from Brenham. She was an NCAA golfing champion. So she feels golf is one of those sports where there's really no competition because of upper body. So she's really been working a lot on that. So is there a movement out there? I mean, you guys are in Dallas. What is that, the third or fourth biggest city in the country? Are the normals going to come back and take over the world, the so-called normies? Are people returning to more valued, more principled kinds of approaches? And we can marginalize. We know we can't get rid of the progressive fringe. We can cut off their funding as much as possible. We've tried to, here at TPPF, we work very hard to get the diversity, equity, and inclusion offices closed on college campuses and stop that hiring. And we've fought critical race theory in public schools. But I don't have a sense for what's happening out in the world in terms of how women see this. What are your all's thoughts?
Well, I'll answer first and turn it over to Jacki. But I mean, we're seeing a huge influx of Christians that are taking our commitment to pray, vote, and engage regularly. I mean, people are committing to do that and saying, I'm signing up to vote in every election for the rest of my life. That's a huge commitment. And we're hoping to scale to 1 million Christians around the nation by the presidential election. But what I'm hearing from people in churches is we're tired. We're tired of staying on the fringes. Give us our marching orders. Tell us what to do. And so we just tell them, hey, let's start praying for our elected officials. Let's start voting in every election and start engaging. We'll teach you, our friends at Texas Public Policy Foundation, others will teach you how to start engaging in common civics, how to engage with your precinct level, how to get involved in your political parties, how to adopt candidates, how to get involved in the process, because if we don't show them how, it's really hard for the average American. They think politics and government is so difficult. And we try to kind of demystify things for people, make it simple. I just wrote a book, Sherry, as you know, that just came out a few weeks ago called Jesus in Politics, My Walk with God in a Mudslinging Profession. And I hope through the book and our curriculum packages that we're kind of demystifying it for people and start getting them activated. And that's what we're seeing. If people have simple action items and a little bit of motivation, they start moving forward.
It's terrific. Jacki, do you have a thought?
Yeah, so the question was, are normies going to come back and take the country back, apparently?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that, but I do believe that what's happening is that people are finally opening their eyes a bit. I think that for so long, we had it so good. You think about all the years. How many years has it been since we have had a war on our territory? I mean, nobody alive today remembers the Civil War, and very few remember Pearl Harbor. Half of us remember 9/11, maybe. The young people apparently have forgotten. But I think that we take for granted because life has been so good here. Mm-hmm. And so, we had basic values that everyone shared. So people took for granted things like that, elections are fair. I trust the institutions. It's okay to send my kid to college. Don't need to worry about. It's okay to let my child watch television. It's not unsafe. Basic things that we took for granted for decades and decades, generations. We now realize, you know what? We've been asleep at the wheel and just ceded our institutions, including Hollywood, to whoever wanted to take, stand up and take the mantle, no matter who they were and what their values were. So I think that we realize that free rider status is over. Like if you want to continue being free and having a decent society with morals and standards, then you better stand up and get active right now. You think about like people are rediscovering who we are. Like, I mean, there were all these people who are kind of on the sidelines. I call them the dormant army of decent normies who don't vote, 50% of them, and they're finally saying, wait a second. Oh, yeah, that's right. It was the Christians who started the abolitionist movement. It was the Christians who founded the hospitals. Look around at what the hospitals are called: Methodist Hospital, Baptist Hospital. Oh, it was the Christians who founded our top universities like Harvard and Yale, and so
Civil rights movement.
The civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And now realizing, oh, wait a second, that doesn't just happen all by itself. Those things happen because people were exposed to extreme evils, whether it was slavery or warfare or suffering without, medical care, whatever it was. And so that all came out of generations of hard work and faith and prayer and sacrifice. And we've all been the beneficiaries of that. And, it kind of coasted for a long time because we inherited such a great system overall and great tradition. But people are now realizing, maybe I was kind of like a nominal Christian, and, I was just kind of sort of okay with how things were. Now I realize if I just believe in truth, I'm on team truth. I'm not on team woke or team progressive or team whatever's taken over the institutions, right? There's suddenly this clear line of demarcation that wasn't there before, even 5 years ago, for, I think, the average person in this country. So yes, you're going to see greater participation, I think, in the elections, in school boards, and people just waking up.
Well, we have a couple of minutes before we take questions from our online audience. And I wanted, here at TPPF, we're all about public policy. And our goal is always, of course, to make Texas the state where people want to raise a family, want to have children, want to send their kids to school, want to experience all those things you just described, to feel safe with our institutions. What policies are there policies we have not addressed that we need to be addressing in terms of education, in terms of environmental policy, in terms of public health policy? Are there things we're not addressing that we need to be addressing?
I will say we need to just say that women care about school choice. I mean, women care about how their kids get educated, and giving parents the freedom to spend their money on homeschooling, private education, Christian education, however they want to spend those dollars. That is an important issue that I think brings a lot more women to the table if we communicate it, with the right principal points behind it.
I agree with that. I think the number one thing we can do across all policies is decentralize it. Everything that we can take away from Washington and return to the states or the local government where, parents or women for any policy issue can actually hold people accountable. If the local school board's making the decision, you can hold them accountable. You can elect them and unelect them. If some bureaucrat inside the Department of Education is making really powerful and impactful decisions, there's nothing you can do about it, really. It doesn't matter who you elect, whether it doesn't matter what political party you elect, that bureaucrat will still be there, still in some basement in Washington. That's where all the policy is made. People don't realize, even with criminal law, there's like 3,000 to 4,000 criminal laws that Congress has passed federally. There are 300,000 to 400,000 criminal laws that the agencies have passed. So that's where all the bad stuff is happening. And it's very hard to get at that. The more you can decentralize, which is really a conservative principle, power is safer when it's diffused. You can hold it accountable. If something goes wrong, you can stop it. So that's, I think, that's the guiding principle across almost every issue I address. How do I get it closer to me? How do I get it closer to Americans to control and not an unelected oligarchy in Washington whose names you don't even know, and you can't elect them or unelect them?
Well, thank you for that. We have a couple of questions from folks online. One is, what is your advice on navigating conversations and relationships with people who might have the same conservative values, but not the same faith?
You talk to them about the issue that they want to talk to. I mean, we try to build bridges with everything we're doing. So if somebody wants to have a conversation on fiscal policy and they're not Christians, yay, let's have a conversation about fiscal policy. You want to reach people where they are. And I think sometimes we, whether we're people of faith, talking to unbelievers, we tend to shut some people out that we should be having conversations with. And frankly, it's conservative. Sometimes we don't have conversations with people in the middle that we should be pulling over. And the only way we can pull them over is civility. We didn't even get into that, but civility, communication styles, and trying to bring them into a conversation versus pushing them away. And so that's what we try to encourage people to do.
I just strongly, I strongly encourage making a conscious effort to have those conversations with people who don't believe like you, whether it's their faith or whether it's their politics. I really think that we have to try very hard to maintain human contact with what I'm going to call the other side of the argument or the debate or the aisle or whatever. I mean, what every media outlet, it seems, and institution is trying to do is divide us. If you spend quality time with people who are not like you, you're going to find out that you have a lot in common. You don't objectify each other. You see each other as human beings. And personally, like, I've always had this extreme curiosity to find out what makes other people tick. So I have very intentionally circulated amongst people who don't think like me. If there's a Democrat meeting across the street, I'll go. Like, I'm serious. I wade into hostile territory as much as I can, because I think it's really challenging. You get to be an ambassador. You get to learn. We've got to figure out where is the beachhead where we can communicate and never break off communication or contact. People in your family who don't think like you, I know that might be complicated, but those are people with whom you have the most influence. If you don't share politics, I encourage it. I think it's how, like, we're kind of like in a cold civil war right now. We need to stop the war. We need to, we've got to stop this. We can't let this turn hot. We've got to save this country by finding ways to not be divided. And so every opportunity you get, I would say, don't miss these opportunities. People miss them all the time. I see people refuse to even speak to their children about politics or faith because it's, divisive. I'm like, hey, that's where you're the most influential. You've got a foundation between you. So, with love, always with love. But please, do not wall yourself off into a bubble. Find those opportunities. Be very deliberate.
That's so important. I mean, one of the things, if we had an hour, we could talk about is the importance of marriage and the fact that marriage is going down and fewer people are getting married. And one of the problems with that was the data that I was giving you earlier. One of your community groups is your political parties, and the Democrats have too many men, and the Democrats have too many women, and the Republicans have more men than women, and so those groups are not getting together among younger people. So it's people, you've got to wade into those conversations. We had a good friend at TPPF. We did a piece right after the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, and he came in. He was a New Yorker, but had moved to Texas, and he said that his family in New York were afraid to put out their menorahs for the holidays because they were afraid that they would be attacked. And so he says to his sister, well, it's not so bad in Texas. I feel pretty safe in Texas. And she said, well, there's no abortion in Texas. And he said, yeah, there's no jihad either. And I thought that was a point you could pull together on that, and you could see that we've got something going on here. Ladies, this has been terrific. It's a great conversation. Obviously, we could go on for another hour. I thank you so much for joining us. The Texas Public Policy Foundation thanks you. Bunni Pounds, head of Christian Engaged, and Jacki Deason from the Jacki Deason Show on Blaze Media. You can find them easily on the web. Go find them. Look for that interview between Jacki and Bunni, and you can get more information on this. Thank you so much for joining us today.